Hey everybody, welcome back to Church Public. Thank you for tuning in today. My name is Matt Odegaard, and we are looking today at current events from a Christian perspective. There's just a bunch of different things that either people have asked me about or I just have noticed in the news that I would love to talk about today as we process through what is going on in the world, how we live in the world, and follow Jesus in the midst of all of this craziness that's going on. So thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it. As always, you can check out churchpublic.com for more. Let's go ahead and get started. Again, welcome back to Church Public. I really appreciate you tuning in today. This is a labor of love, a listener-supported event. If you want to help out, you can go to churchpublic.com/support. I really appreciate it. If you want to just share it, like it, subscribe, do all of those things, that really helps out too. You can do that on all of the podcast platforms. This happens to be one where you may want to see some of the video that's going on if you're just listening on audio, but I appreciate it either way, wherever you are getting this. So thank you so much for being part of this community, trying to grow awareness. You don't even have to take my word for any of this. I just want you to be more aware of what's going on in the news, and a bunch of these stories I'm just not seeing in the news in general, and I think they're important. So that's why I want to bring them to your attention. I've had, again, as I mentioned, just over this weekend, a couple of people asking, like, what's going on in this? What's going on in this? I can't find information about it anywhere, and I just want to be a resource. I want to help you understand what is going on in the world, especially from a Christian's perspective, because unfortunately, there's not a lot of that out there. That's the other reason that I'm doing this. I get a lot of people who say, well, I can watch the mainstream news, and it seems like they're not always telling the truth. We'll just say it that way. I can watch conservative news, and they definitely have some interest in certain things as well. And I definitely am conservative. I'm not making any claims otherwise, but I also am very Christian. I'm following Jesus and trying to put Jesus first in all of these things. So hopefully you hear that, and I will try to tell you when I'm telling you my opinion or just the facts as we hear and what's going on in the news. So a couple of topics that we're looking at today. We're looking at the March for Life 2022. It was the 49th anniversary of the March for Life. That's a wonderful event that is celebrating life and celebrating choosing life. We'll look at that in a little more detail in a moment. We have Canadian children who are now asked to inform on their parents on their medical status. So that's not as great as the first. And then I was asked about supply chain issues. So I'm going to break down really briefly. It's a very complicated issue, but we'll look at that quite briefly. And then Ukraine, an unfolding story that we don't know all of yet, but it really is turning out to be probably a terrible disaster. Hopefully, God willing and praying, not as bad as Afghanistan, but let's get into some of that. So March for Life 2022. It was an incredible event in Washington, D.C. Actually, I'm really sad that I was not able to go. I looked into it, and with things that are going on in my life, I was not able to get there. I'm hoping, again, God willing, to get there next year, and hoping next year that it's actually a celebration. And the reason I hope it's a celebration next year is that this is the 49th year, and really, Roe v. Wade potentially is going to be overturned by the Dobbs versus Mississippi case that's in front of the Supreme Court right now. I've talked about that at length in the past. You can go back and listen to some of those episodes on any podcast platform or churchpublic.com. You can do a search for abortion or Roe v. Wade or things like that. But just in super brief sort, the Dobbs versus Mississippi is about a 15-week abortion ban from Mississippi, and they're going to have to review the Roe v. Wade decision, and they're going to have to review whether or not Roe v. Wade is actually constitutional, in that there is a constitutional right for a woman to get an abortion from the Constitution. Now, the spoiler alert is, and you can go and read the Constitution for yourself, you don't have to take my word for it, but the word abortion or anything thereof is not in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights or amendments or anything like that. It's just not there. It's based loosely on this idea of a right to privacy, which again may or may not be in the Constitution actually, depending on how you read it. But there definitely is not specifically any clause in the Constitution. Now, you'll hear detractors say it's a constitutional right based on precedent, and that's this stare decisis idea of Supreme Court law that if a Supreme Court rules something, then you should always follow what that Supreme Court rules. But of course, we know that's not true, as we see in Dred Scott decision and Plessy versus Ferguson and other decisions that clearly were bad Supreme Court decisions based on the culture, not on the Constitution, and based on bad culture, an immoral culture, not on biblical value, which, again, I'm always going to return to. So even liberal scholars and justices and lawyers can agree and do agree that the Roe v. Wade decision is not particularly constitutional. Now they're just saying it's precedental. It means it happened, so we just have to agree with it forever. That's just ridiculous. If a law is bad, you change the law. If a ruling in the Supreme Court is bad, you change the ruling. And that is what this court is going up against in the Dobbs versus Mississippi case. And that's why it's a really interesting and exciting year in terms of the pro-life movement, because it would change some things. Now, does it eliminate abortion entirely? No, it actually doesn't. It just means that abortion goes back to being federal and a federal mandate that you have to provide abortion in every state to state by state, and the state gets to determine whether it will have abortion or not. So that is the big thing at hand, and people are saying it's the end of this women's right to choose, all the other euphemisms we've gone through in the past. They are euphemisms. Abortion in every case is killing a child. There just is no case where that's not true. And if Roe is overturned, it's not even the end of this. It's a good step, and that's great. But it doesn't stop the end of the fight against killing babies. And it is a good step. So I definitely am excited about this. And as we're talking, I'll put on this March video. So if you're not watching, I just want you to visualize, I don't know, tens and tens of thousands of people streaming down. This was the March for Life over the weekend. It was just a fantastic thing to watch if you didn't see any of this. So I'll just let that go on for a second while I continue to talk and just say that we do want to continue to fight to save the lives of endless babies. And some critics are saying that conservatives just want to end all abortion. And I would chime in with other conservatives and saying, yes, that's right, we do, because killing babies in any instance is still killing babies. Roe v. Wade and the ending of it, and if you're not watching, again, the parade is still going, and it's in full fast speed. So it is so many people, and it was so encouraging to see that many people stand up for these poor babies, tens of thousands, and in some cases hundreds of thousands of babies that have been killed. And millions over the years. It really is a supreme tragedy that we accept this as a culture at large. But I wanted to get back to saying that yes, we actually do. I do want to end all abortion. Yeah, I mean, I will come out and say that. I can't. There is no. I've talked about this at length before. There is no place where it actually is not killing a baby, and there are so many arguments. I'm not going to go through all the arguments right now. Yeah, you can go and look up other arguments, and you can go and listen to some of my other episodes as to the arguments. But yes, it was a great march. It was great to watch, and hopefully next year, the 50th anniversary of the March for Life will be a celebration and a great step. And states are taking notice of this too. I think that's another point that I just want to say before we move on to the next topic, and that is that according to the Guttmacher Institute, more than 100 new abortion restrictions have been enacted by states even over the last year, which is a record. And that group, the Guttmacher Institute, quote, said this 2021 was, quote, the worst year for abortion rights in almost half a century, end quote, which actually is great news because, you know, we don't want abortion. I don't want abortion. So the worst year for abortion rights to me is actually a win. And then we just have to keep praying for the babies because that is the future. The future is pro-life. And so we want to continue to pray that people's hearts of stone will be turned into flesh, will be melted, will be changed into people who can really appreciate that babies deserve to live. They don't deserve to be killed. It just continues to be crazy to me that it's such a hot issue that people fight so hard just for the right to kill a baby. At any rate, speaking of children, we move now to Canada. Canada, I mean, I have friends, relatives in Canada. It continues to, I don't know what to say, be a hotbed of liberal insanity. I mean, they just keep going farther and farther. And so we're going to watch this video of some children in Quebec. And now Quebec, if you're not familiar, is the one province where they just speak French, and they hate you if you don't speak French, and they don't like English and that kind of thing. So unfortunately, this is in French, but I'm going to translate for you. If you're watching, there's translation on the screen. Actually, a couple of the words of the translation are wrong, but anyway, it doesn't matter. So let's just watch this video. I will narrate it a little bit as the video goes along, and here we go.
Tous les deux, on a une seule dose.
So it says, yes, we are both vaccinated. So are you in favor of mandatory vaccine? The minister says, yes. And someone comes on the scene. It appears to be a mom. I'll pause it for a second. And the mom says, yes, it actually looks like I'm drilling them with the answers ahead of time. And I mean, obviously that's what happened here, because children don't want to have shots ever, much less encourage other children to have shots. I mean, if you are a parent at all, if you are a parent or know anyone that's a parent or have ever been around children, you know, there is not a child on the planet who wants to go get a shot. Like, that doesn't exist. So the fact that this has been coerced or has been trained in advance, that these are the answers these kids are supposed to give, is inherently obvious. But it's still terrifying that they coerced children to do these kinds of things. So that was the random woman saying, looks like I drilled them ahead of time with the answers, which surely she did. But here's the next question, where it just, for me, takes a crazy dark turn. The announcer, moderator, whatever, says, what should we do with the people who don't want the vaccine? Answer. We should call the police. And then you hear these voices in the back saying, yes, that's right. We call the police when people don't want to get the vaccine. Sorry, what? Okay, we'll continue on. If they don't have the vaccine, it can make a lot of people in danger. So like what the government does right now, we should cut away everything from them little by little until they submit and get vaccinated. And there's applause happening. If that's not terrifying to you, like, seriously, what should we do with the people who don't want the vaccine? Call the police. Oh, and then just cut everything away from them. Remove all of the things that they have until they submit to what you want them to do. And then the interviewer says, hey, looks like we got some future politicians here, which also is a terrifying statement, though surprisingly accurate. You know, politicians convincing you to do what they want you to do. Anyway, it should just be obvious by this point that the government really just wants to control you, and it's just crazy town. But I mean, for some reason, the leaders, the crazies in Canada, think it's a good idea to have their children inform on the parents about their medical status or vaccination status or some kind of status. It's almost as if people have forgotten other regimes' use of children to inform on the parents and how that went. For instance, Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot, Hitler, etc. Please, people, Canada, America, everywhere, raise your children right. Please talk to them about biblical morality, not this statist, communist tactics of having children inform on their parents. Communists, fascists, I mean, two sides of the same coin, as Margaret Thatcher said. This is not a good idea. Like, to train your children to inform on your parents, on their parents, on their friends, not only is just terrible parenting, but as I mentioned in some of the other regimes, that never ended well. That was, I mean, again, I won't go too far into it. I'm looking at a couple of books on my bookshelf, like, where kids did this and then their parents just disappeared in certain regimes. For instance, in the USSR, in Mao's or Pol Pot. Again, go on and on in this. Like, the kids naively, innocently, you know, just if your parents aren't doing what we ask them to do, just tell us about it and everything will be fine and we'll take care of it. And then their parents disappear and never come back again. This road doesn't end well, people, and it just drives me insane that no one remembers that these tactics have been tried. And literally tens to hundreds of millions of people have died because of these kinds of tactics. Like, please stop doing this. Just please. Canada, America, stop it. All right, supply chain issues. I had somebody call me about supply chain issues. They just moved to a new place and they go in the grocery store and they're like, hey, why are my grocery store shelves empty right now? And I haven't talked about this too much, and it is a very complex issue. So I'm not going to get into it all the way, but I did want to say a couple of things about it because it is very complex on the one hand, but it's also kind of simple because when you do things, they have consequences. And when you run policies, the policies have consequences, which is why I've been saying now for years at this point, you need to vote for the people who will do the policies that you want, not if they have orange hair or they're bad or you don't like them or whatever. Like, look at their policy record and see what they make decisions based on. And that will tell you what your life is going to be like. And this is the important thing. You need to vote on the issues and vote on what you want to see happen, not as much on personality. And I know that gets into this weird Christian nationalism thing that some people remark on, and I'll talk more about that later. I'm not going to get into that ball of wax at this point, but you really just have to understand that this is a direct result of voting for somebody who is not for America and not for the American people and doesn't care about you living a good life. They just want power and they want the things that they want. And I've espoused those in other places, and we'll look more into that as days goes on. But in terms of supply chain, there are numerous factors, but there's three big ones in this particular supply chain issue. And that is, number one, the COVID shutdowns. Number two, worker shortage. And this is not because of COVID. Worker shortage is not because of COVID. Worker shortage is because of government policies like paying people to stay home, which, why would you go to work if you're getting paid more to stay home? Equals worker shortage. Number three is ongoing COVID ongoing COVID regulations. So first, the shutdown disrupted many industries. I think we all know this. Some of us have been affected by this directly. From production in country and abroad, this slowed down distribution. And then second and third, there is a worker shortage in production and a huge shortage in distribution. And this is a 1-2 punch because these new vax mandates that, although the Biden administration just got struck down by the Supreme Court that businesses over 100 people cannot be enforced through OSHA to enforce the vaccine mandate, there are still companies that are doing that, and the Biden administration just now put also into place, and Canada has put into place, there's these other vaccine mandates that you can't cross the border without showing a vaccine pass in Canada or Mexico. So truck drivers especially, and I'll focus specifically on that, though there's some boating issues, there's a bunch of dock issues, there's some other issues, but right now the biggest thing that we're seeing is the trucking industry, because almost 70-something% of all U.S. freight is moved by trucks. And so the trucking industry, according to Chris Spear, the American Trucking Association's chief executive, there's around 80,000 workers that are short that the trucking industry used to have and usually has during this time of year. That's a lot of drivers and workers and that are not available to ship things. So that's going to mean the stuff is not going to get to you. It can't get to you. There's no trucks, there's no drivers, there's no truck loaders. People are not moving stuff because they can't. Now we also have the number three, the 1-2 punch of shortage and vaccine mandates. Spear said that vaccine mandates are adding additional headwind to trucking companies, which are moving 72% of the domestic freight. He went on to say, if you are concerned about the supply chain, adding additional layers and mandates on top of that is not going to make it any easier. Again, that was Spear. And then a statement from the American Trucking Association in November said, we're concerned the mandate will cripple an already strained supply chain. We estimate companies covered by the mandate could lose 37% of drivers when it already is down 80,000 drivers. Can you imagine another third of drivers removed from the workforce? This is not a great solution to not having things on the shelves. Again, policy. This is really all about policy. And you couple that with rising prices, which we all have seen because it costs more to move things. It costs more to buy things. According to Bureau of Labor Statistics, inflation is up 7%. This is the highest rate in America in 40 years since something like 1982. CNBC has summarized prices and the rising prices of several items. I'll just read a couple of them. Gas is up 50% in some areas. That's 49.6 or so. Used vehicles are up 37%. Hotels are up 30%. Furniture is up 13%. Meat and fish and poultry up like 12 something percent. New vehicles are 11%. I'm not going to read all of these. There's a bunch, but you got rising prices. You have no way to ship them. These are problems, and even grocery stores, I wouldn't say are part of the problem, but they are impacted by all of these problems because they can't keep the shelves stocked because the availability of goods is down somewhere in like the 10% range. And also, they don't have enough workers as well. Again, the shortage. Some of the grocery stores, according to the National Grocers Association, are reporting less than 50% of their normal workforce. So all of these things add up to, well, your store is probably not going to have stuff. And at the moment, it's not looking that it's going to get better. If these border mandates remain in place, any goods coming down from Canada, any goods coming up from Mexico are, not any, but many of the goods are not going to be able to get across the border as well. In Canada, though, they're kind of fighting back for this. Like, again, we had some negative Canada news. We're going to have some positive Canada news. There are a bunch of truckers, somewhere around like 32,000 truckers who are in Canada who are pushing back against this. I think that's fantastic, and I applaud them. However, it also impacts the fact that we won't be getting the stuff that is in those trucks. So it's a give and take. But at some point, regular people have to say, no, I'm not doing this crazy town that you're trying to make me do. I just want to feed my family. I want to live in peace. I want to have some freedoms here. It's this situation is not going to get much better anytime soon. Now, I also want to point out that apparently in the West, like in California, of which I had been a resident for many, many years and am not anymore, and I hate to say thankfully, but it's true. It's like the Wild Wild West. There's like train robberies in the Wild Wild West now. If you're not watching, here is a picture of a train next to thousands and thousands of boxes. An official with Union Pacific Railroad revealed last week that the organization believes approximately 90 shipping containers, and I'm playing a video from Twitter, and I'll play these in a second, but approximately 90 shipping containers are compromised by thieves every day. 90 of these giant-sized shipping containers are broken into, and stuff is pulled out every single day. Here's the video. There's an Amazon package that's not even opened, and he's just going around looking at some of the debris from all of these packages where people are just stealing them and then taking them and selling them, doing all this stuff. So if you're not getting things or you lost an Amazon package, it might be on the side of this train. I don't know. Again, I won't get too much into this, but again, this is about policy, and it is important to note that this is about policy. The local authorities are catching these criminals, but unfortunately, this is according to an official. This says, quote, criminals are caught and arrested, turned over to local authorities for booking and arraigned before local courts. Charges are usually reduced to a misdemeanor, petty offense, or something like trespassing, and the criminals are released. And that whole process usually takes less than 24 hours. So they are catching some people doing this. But because of policies in California and specifically LA, like no cash bail policy, extended time frame to appear in court, the same people are doing this over and over again, and they're literally telling the officials or telling the officers or whatever, like, go ahead and arrest me and I'll be out tomorrow or maybe the next day, and we'll just keep doing it. So good job, California, on that creating literally another wild, wild west where people are doing train robberies and no one seems to be able to stop them or care to. And again, the part of the problem is that the Union Pacific Police Department is in charge of this, not LA police or sheriffs. So it's an absolute mess. And if you again saw the pictures, it's crazy town out there. And that's of course adding to the crisis of not having stuff on the shelves, not getting stuff delivered because it's on the side of a train yard somewhere. It's so bad that the Union Pacific Railroad has actually said they may make, quote, serious changes to their operating plans to avoid LA County entirely, end quote. This is the state that we're in. It's crazy town. Sorry, I didn't get the name earlier. John Schreiber, CBS LA photojournalist, published that image, and that was fantastic. Okay, finally, I just want to hit Ukraine for a moment because in current events, it's important to understand kind of what is going on, and it is unfolding. And I'm not going to get into it very much. Ukraine has been an issue for a long, long time because it's kind of in between Russia and Europe proper and some of the ports there in the sea, it's been in contention from Russia for a long time, but Russia has been amassing forces on its border for a long time as well. And again, I'm not going to get into the geopolitical too much right now, but it is important to note that the President of the United States of America is not helping the situation because what he said was this:
Russia will be held accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not do, etc. But if they actually do what they're capable of doing with the force amassed on the border, it is going to be a disaster for Russia. My guess is...
Now, this is a president saying two things. One, watch out because it's going to be an issue for you, except if you do a minor incursion. In that case, you're probably fine. If you just invade a little bit and, kill a few people, invade a few towns, no big deal. Just take a little bit of Ukraine and you'll be okay. And again, this has been going all around the internet. So if you've seen it, I get it. But the reason we need to bring it up today is it continues to escalate with the embassy in all of Ukraine, the American embassies and people working there from America have been asked to leave. Last night, the State Department ordered the families of all American personnel at the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine to leave the country. And there was this State Department statement to people who are just U.S. citizens in Ukraine. So this was from the State Department. Quote, given that the president has said military action by Russia could come at any time, the U.S. government will not be in a position to evacuate U.S. citizens. So U.S. citizens currently present in Ukraine should plan accordingly. End quote. Arrange commercial flights, etc. If this sounds eerily familiar, ex post facto, after the fact, of something like Afghanistan, where oh, sorry, we accidentally evacuated everybody from the country except for most of the U.S. citizens, and now you can't get out. And by the way, if you haven't been paying attention, there are literally still U.S. citizens in Afghanistan right now who cannot get out. It's January 2022, and this is still a thing. So if this sounds similar to Afghanistan, that's because it is, and that is concerning and should be concerning. And it's something that, one, again, as Christians, from a Christian worldview, we need to pray for. But this is a terrible foreign policy. It was a terrible, I don't know what would possess a person to say something like that. Clearly there are some other issues going on, but it's just an issue when you say, hey, please don't invade, but if you do, just make it a small invasion, because small invasions don't count that much. You just kill a few people. It's no big deal. Just do that. Just don't kill a lot of people, or don't take a lot of the land. That's fine. Telling a warlord dictator to do that just defies belief. I just can't imagine the leader of the country and in some estimation the biggest and most powerful country in the free world telling the rest of the world that is really bad. It's just a bad look. It's a bad foreign policy. It's just bad. there was a lot of press corps cleanup that tried to clean this up. But how do you clean that up? How do you walk that back? That's like a bell that has been rung that cannot be unrung. Like it happened, and now other leaders in the world are taking notice of it. And again, Ukraine is a piece of this. Now, a bigger piece actually is Taiwan, and we've talked about that a little bit, but in terms of China and Taiwan, China believes Taiwan is part of it, though Taiwan has been recognized as its own country for decades. China wants Taiwan back, and even over the weekend, there were some Chinese naval ships that were amassing again around there. China is doing the same thing, building this thing around Taiwan, and it appears that they're going to try and take over Taiwan very soon. And the reason that's bad is there's a lot of technology that comes from Taiwan that cannot be produced anywhere else in the world. And if you want China in charge of all of your technology, like, you really should rethink that. That's a bad policy decision too. But when the president says, well, just invade a little, it's no big deal, Putin, who leader of Russia, is going to say, well, okay. And, Xi is going to say, okay, we really have to pray for this. And just, again, from a Christian perspective, like, knowing that we need to pray for those that are persecuted, and this is not going to help in any way in these particular situations. So I'll bring more information and news as we go on. I just wanted to bring you a few of the current events that are happening around America and around the world as we figure out how we live in this world, how we're supposed to operate. I appreciate you tuning in. Go ahead, like, subscribe, share, and we will see you next time. My name is Matt Odegaard. God bless, and keep the faith.